Welcome to the Deconstructionist Deep Dive.
The podcast that doesn't just accept the story.
We break it
We examine the pieces.
and expose the machinery inside.
Let's dive in.
What if everything about the laws of success isn't just wrong, but is designed to be wrong? So, for years, right, we've all seen this endless parade of self-help gurus, motivational speakers. They're all promising freedom, usually through, sheer discipline.
The grind.
Exactly. But today, we've got this, frankly, devastating analysis. It looks at the entire success ideology, this whole genre, and it just flips the script completely.
Yeah, our source material here doesn't treat this stuff as just like helpful tips for a better life. No, it frames it as something much more deliberate, like an explicit piece of social engineering, and a highly effective one at that.
Okay, so what's the mission today, then? What are we trying to uncover here?
Our goal is to really introduce you to what this analysis calls the servitude blueprint. We need to move way past the simple question of, is this good advice?
At least at surface level.
Way past it. We need to ask the deeper, maybe more dangerous question: what system is this whole philosophy actually built to serve? And maybe more importantly, why does it work so well? Why is it such a perfect mechanism for, well, ideological control?
So if you buy into this, if you follow this path, you think you're climbing towards, I don't know, mastery, freedom.
That's the promise.
But what if, and this is the core idea, right? What if you're actually just optimizing yourself, making yourself into the perfect, the most compliant little agent for the existing financial system?
Precisely. And to see how that works, we absolutely have to start by laying out the foundational worldview, the bedrock belief system this whole philosophy demands you accept from the get-go.
Because that foundation is the key. It's the lock.
It's the lock. It keeps the believer, the adherent, exactly where the system needs them to be. Without that foundation, the rest of it it falls apart.
Okay, so what is it? What's this foundation?
The analysis calls it the hierarchical battlefield metaphor. Essentially, the world, according to this success blueprint, is presented as this unavoidable zero-sum game. It's constant, brutal competition.
A war zone, basically.
Pretty much. And in this war zone, there are only two possible roles you can play. You're either a conqueror or you're a subject.
And nobody wants to be a subject.
Exactly. So the system forces you relentlessly into the role of the conqueror. You have no other choice if you want to avoid being, crushed.
I can see how that's compelling, actually. It sort of validates struggle, doesn't it? If you're having a hard time, well, you're just fighting a battle. It's normal.
It taps into something real, yeah. But the kind of person this philosophy demands you become is very, very specific. It requires you to embody what they call homo economicus.
Economic man.
Right. And if you haven't run into this term, homo economicus is this theoretical idea of a person who is purely rational, strictly self-interested.
All calculation.
All calculation. Relentlessly focused on accumulation, on maximizing their own utility. So, in this blueprint, your value isn't your creativity or your empathy or your kindness. None of that matters.
What matters?
Your demonstrable ability to acquire stuff,
Right.
to optimize, to win. That's it.
Okay, so if you accept that, if you become homo economicus, then that changes how you see everything, right? Every interaction.
Absolutely. Every single thing in your life has to be viewed through that economic lens.
Yeah.
Think about how people approach networking sometimes.
Oh, yeah. It's often just calculation. Who can help me? What can I get?
Exactly. It's treated purely as optimization, a means to an end, not about building genuine connections. That's homo economicus right there in action.
And that cynical view then shapes all your social dynamics.
It dictates the whole spectrum. Life becomes just a status hierarchy, a ladder you have to climb. And every relationship, every single one, is fundamentally transactional.
So a partner isn't really a partner.
Not in the way we might normally think. In this model, a partner becomes a safe space. Yeah, but it's a functional safe space, a necessary support system for your ambition.
Wow. And a bank.
A bank isn't a service provider. It's a tool for leverage, period. And the moment any relationship stops providing clear economic or, let's say, emotional utility for your conquest,
With disposable.
it becomes expendable
Yeah.
because it's not serving the primary goal, accumulation and climbing the hierarchy.
And how does time fit into this, the whole temporal outlook?
That reinforces the grind. Success is always framed as this linear, accumulative process. It's a straight line upwards, hopefully.
Which means you have to constantly sacrifice in private, right? The early mornings, the late nights, the isolation.
All of that. Private sacrifice, always, for the eventual public validation. the proof that you've reached a higher status level. The value is always, always deferred to the future. It's never about the present moment.
Okay, but here's where we bring in the skepticism, right? The deconstruction. Why must the world only be this battlefield?
Exactly. That's the critical cut. If we just accept that premise up front, we've basically swallowed the core deception already.
Because that framework just dismisses everything else.
Instantly. Any path to meaning, any source of value that isn't defined by crushing the competition, it's just ignored. It's irrelevant. What happens to basic human needs?
Yeah.
Community, shared joy, cooperation.
Or non-economic value like art or empathy or just being a good citizen.
Where does that fit when accumulation is the only thing that matters? It doesn't. It can't.
So the battlefield narrative isn't just a description,
Yeah.
it's functional. It generates the fear and the urgency you need to make people efficient, obedient agents within that system.
That's the argument, yeah. It primes you for compliance.
Okay, so we've got this, frankly, pretty bleak foundational worldview. Now let's get into the strategic pillars. The analysis breaks it down into a three-part plan this ideology tells you to follow.
That's right. And the beauty, or the deception, is how each step seems logical but contains an immediate critical vulnerability, a flaw that actually benefits the system, not you.
It sounds almost elegant in its structure.
Oh, it's very elegant, deceptively so. It tells you first, get total control over your emotional life, then get control over your money, and finally get control over your actions. Simple, right?
Seems straightforward.
Yeah.
Let's start with Pillar A. Secure your base, emotional insulation. What's the goal here?
The core objective is basically to minimize emotional turbulence, minimize external influence. Why? So that every single drop of your energy can be laser focused on that relentless accumulation we talked about.
Okay, insulate yourself. And the first step in doing that is kind of surprising. Or maybe not.
Well, it's often one of the most culturally loaded dictates and maybe the most revealing. It's that advice, usually aimed at men, that choosing a woman is the single most important decision he'll ever make.
Ah, right. I've heard versions of that countless times.
And the analysis here frames this not as relationship advice, but as the patriarchal bargain. It's not about love or equality.
What is it about then, according to this analysis?
Well, the source analysis points out the immediate, obvious flaws. It's built entirely on a patriarchal assumption, right? And it's incredibly heteronormative.
Defining the partner purely in transactional terms again.
Exactly. It suggests implicitly or sometimes explicitly that men are somehow inherently distracted or derailed by women. And that idea is then used to justify why the woman needs to be selected very carefully.
Selected as what?
As a de-risking asset, someone whose primary function is to stabilize the man's emotional life so he can stay focused on work, on conquering.
Wow. De-risking asset, that's cold.
It is. And that stability, the analysis argues, comes at a high price, a price usually paid by the partner. Because the ideology concludes the home must be a safe space for conquering.
A safe space for conquering. Just let that phrase sink in.
Yeah. It's not a place for mutual rest or shared vulnerability or, partnership. It's a personal pit stop, an emotional recovery zone designed only to refuel the primary agent of success.
That's incredibly revealing, I think. It basically mandates rigid gender roles, doesn't it? Even if people today try to spin it as just, oh, choose a supportive partner.
The underlying dynamic remains. The labor, the invisible work of making that home emotionally safe, managing his stress, preventing conflict. Where does that fall?
It falls unequally, almost certainly onto the partner who isn't the designated conqueror.
Right. And even when the advice tries to sound a bit more sophisticated, it still ends up tethered to the man's status, like the idea that high-level men respect social intelligence in a partner.
Okay, that sounds slightly more modern, maybe.
In the surface. But you peel it back, and the instruction is still transactional. The woman's social intelligence isn't valued for her sake, for her fulfillment. It's valuable because it strategically enhances the man's social standing among his powerful buddies.
So she's not a companion, she's an accessory, a status symbol.
An accessory that confers status, that's the function within this blueprint.
Okay, so step one, lock down the home base. Basically, turn your partner into an emotional support system. What's next for emotional insulation?
Then the philosophy immediately tells you to isolate yourself externally. This is the isolation blueprint.
How does that work?
The key guidance here is to separate opinions from having a say.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
Well, it sounds reasonable at first, right? Like, listen to advice, but you make the final call, sure.
Yeah.
But the problem is the absolute separation this ideology demands. It suggests, essentially, that everyone out there can have an opinion on your life, sure, whatever, but nobody, absolutely nobody, should have any real power to influence your decisions or your path.
That sounds lonely. And maybe dangerous.
Extremely. And it's reinforced by the explicit command to keep your inner circle incredibly small, like pathologically small.
So what's the result? Not independence, but...
Pathological isolation, paranoia even. If you systematically filter out every dissenting voice, every piece of critical feedback, you become intellectually safe, yes, but safe from challenge.
Which is the fastest way to stagnate. And maybe the fastest way to miss the flaws in the very blueprint you're following.
Exactly. It creates this perfect echo chamber where the only voice you trust is your own, and your own voice is just constantly repeating the propaganda of the success blueprint itself. You mistake tunnel vision for focus.
Okay. So you supposedly secured your emotional base by outsourcing most of your emotional maintenance and walling yourself off from different ideas. Where does the blueprint tell you to point all that pent-up, focused energy?
Right. Where does all that anxious energy go? It moves straight to pillar B. Fortify your resources. Fear-based finance.
Of course.
Always. The core objective here is pretty straightforward. Convert your liquid cash into illiquid assets, hard assets, preferably A1 quality assets. Create a financial moat around yourself.
Protection, security.
That's the sell. But the really critical piece here is the psychological premise that underpins this whole financial strategy. This is where it gets really sneaky. This is where the self-blame, the self-pathologizing, really kicks into high gear. The absolute central axiom of the financial strategy is this little gem, the self-as-liability myth. You're told you are your own biggest financial liability.
Wow. Okay. Break it down.
I mean, it's brilliant manipulation, isn't it, in a terrifying way. The system literally creates a massive psychological problem for you. It highlights the inherent risk of being human. You might make mistakes, you might impulse buy, you might self-sabotage. It drums up that fear.
And then it conveniently offers the solution.
Immediately. The solution is get your money out of your own hands. Force your investments into things you can't easily sell, like prime real estate. They are literally pathologizing the self, your own agency, to sell you a specific conservative financial strategy.
So it's basically saying you can't be trusted.
Exactly. It pathologizes self-reliance itself. You're told you're too impulsive, too weak, too undisciplined to handle your own liquid capital because you might make a bad decision or, heaven forbid, you might actually enjoy some of it. Spend it on something frivolous.
So the system justifies these really conservative, fear-based financial moves.
Intense fear-based decisions. And who do those decisions overwhelmingly benefit?
Existing asset holders, institutions.
Bingo. They create constant high demand for the most stable, traditional investments, prime real estate, blue chip stocks, locking money into long-term things. It props up the existing structures.
So the specific advice is usually about buying A1 assets, like prime real estate.
Overwhelmingly, prime real estate is king in this model. And also, cultivating premium relationships with banks early in your career. Get cozy with the lenders.
But wait, isn't that contradictory? You're supposed to be this conquering individual, but your strategy relies entirely on banks and property markets.
That's the beautiful trap. This is a strategy designed not for radical independence or disruption, but for deep integration, for preservation of the existing wealth and power structures.
So you're promised mastery, maybe even transcendence over the system.
Right. But the execution of that mastery forces you to continuously feed and rely entirely on the very core financial system you're supposedly trying to beat. The big banks, the established real estate markets, the leverage tools they provide.
You're not building a new world at all. You're just cementing your place, maybe a slightly higher place, within the existing one, making yourself a safe, predictable, valuable customer for high finance.
That is precisely how the blueprint recruits you. It turns you into a conservative agent of the status quo without you even realizing it. It traps your capital, your ambition, in structures that just reinforce the very hierarchy you think you're climbing.
Okay, that's quite the setup. So, Pillar A, emotional insulation via isolation and outsourcing. Pillar B, financial fortification via fear and integration. What's the final piece?
Finally, we get to Pillar C, execute with discipline, the grind valorization. Now that you're emotionally insulated and financially integrated, the objective is just optimize your behavior, maximum efficiency, maximum leverage within the system you've now bought into.
This is where the hustle culture stuff really comes in, I imagine.
Oh yeah, this is the engine room. And one key piece of advice here is what the analysis calls the practical versus sexy false dichotomy.
Practical versus sexy. What does that mean?
The command, almost universally in this literature, is to always pursue practical business opportunities over sexy ones.
Okay, let's unpack the function of that. What happens if everyone follows that advice? If everyone focuses only on the practical?
Well, think about where that directs energy. It pushes ambitious people away from genuinely disruptive fields, away from high-risk, high-innovation sectors, the ones that might seem sexy or uncertain.
Like what? Cutting-edge tech, green energy, big world-changing ideas.
Potentially, yeah. Those are often seen as risky, unproven, sexy. Instead, the practical advice directs energy overwhelmingly toward established, often low innovation, essential service sectors, things where the business models are known, the risks are lower, and entrenched interests are already comfortable.
So instead of trying to build the next Google,
Go buy a local laundromat. Acquire some storage units. Invest in existing franchises. It tells millions of highly disciplined, ambitious people, don't rock the boat. Don't try to really innovate.
find a predictable cash flow within the existing system.
Exactly. Keep the existing cogs turning efficiently within the pre-approved boundaries. It actively stifles the kind of creative disruption that might actually threaten established capital and power structures.
It's a fundamentally limiting framework, disguised as pragmatic wisdom.
Absolutely. And this relentless efficiency, this practicality, is then valorized, made heroic, through the constant emphasis on discipline over motivation.
Right. Discipline is the holy grail. Motivation is fickle. Discipline is reliable.
Now look, discipline itself isn't inherently bad. Obviously, you need it to achieve things.
Ugh.
But it's weaponized here. It's weaponized by linking it to another core axiom, the idea of continuous winning, the belief that winning is continuous, complacency equals loss.
There it is, the perpetual fear machine again.
Nonstop. This means you can never, ever truly rest. You can never celebrate a success properly. Because the moment you stop actively climbing that metaphorical mountain, you're supposedly sliding right back down. You're losing ground. Complacency is death.
So even when you win, you haven't really won because you have to immediately start worrying about the next win.
You got it. This constant injection of chronic urgency, this profound fear of regression, it leads directly, inevitably, to burnout, to chronic anxiety, and maybe saddest of all, it leads to an inability to actually enjoy the present success you supposedly sacrificed everything to get.
Because the goalposts are always moving.
Always. You're kept forever hungry, forever productive, and, crucially, never satisfied. You must sacrifice today for a better tomorrow, but when tomorrow arrives, the blueprint just demands another sacrifice for the day after that. It's an endless, exhausting loop of unfulfillment designed to maximize output.
Okay, so we've got the worldview, the battlefield. We've got the strategy, isolate, integrate, grind. Now let's get to the core psychological manipulation. The tools used to keep people locked in, blaming themselves instead of questioning the system.
Right. This is where it gets truly insidious, I think. Because the entire blueprint, the whole structure, hinges on this one psychological tool. A tool that cleverly absolves the system of any responsibility when the adherent inevitably fails or struggles.
And that tool is?
The radical responsibility trap.
Radical responsibility. I've definitely heard that phrase. What does it mean in this context?
The command is absolute uncompromising. You, the individual, must take radical responsibility for everything in your life. All failure is 100% your fault. No excuses.
It's a core ideology of
hyper-individualism cranked up to an absurd, almost impossible extreme.
Why is that so effective, though? Why do people buy into something so harsh?
Because it's psychologically seductive, isn't it? It grants the person this illusion of ultimate agency. If I am responsible for everything, if I control everything, then theoretically I can fix everything just by trying harder, being more disciplined.
It feels empowering, initially.
Initially, yes. But the consequence is devastating. It completely pathologizes failure, makes it a personal, moral failing, and, most critically, it entirely erases systemic analysis. It forbids it.
What do you mean erases systemic analysis?
If all failure is your fault, then you literally cannot blame the system. You must take personal responsibility for being born into poverty. You must take responsibility for facing discrimination or institutional bias that denies you opportunities.
You have to take responsibility for, say, an economic crash caused by factors way outside your control.
According to this trap, yes. Governmental failure, corporate malpractice, doesn't matter. The fault is always internal. It must be something you did wrong or failed to do right.
Wow, that's a heavy burden.
It's immense, and the analysis argues this is basically the operationalization of a well-known cognitive bias, the just world fallacy.
The belief that the world is fair and people get what they deserve.
Exactly. That deep-seated, often unconscious belief that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. The success ideology weaponizes this fallacy. It forces the individual to ignore the very real, very obvious systemic issues. Unequal starting points, structural racism, the massive advantage of inherited wealth, and instead it makes them apologize for their own oppression.
Because it's easier to cope if you think the fault is yours.
It can be, psychologically. If the system feels rigged and overwhelming, believing the fault lies entirely with you gives you a perverse sense of control. Because at least you can be fixed, right? Just apply more discipline. Trying to fix the whole system, the blueprint tells you that's impossible, a waste of time.
So radical responsibility keeps you focused inward, blaming yourself. What if that's not enough? What's the final backstop?
If that intense self-blame doesn't keep you marching in line, the final ideological lever they pull is what the analysis calls the incrementalist pacifier.
The incrementalist pacifier.
The ultimate conclusion, the final takeaway message hammered home by this philosophy is often this. Look, you can't really change the world. You can only hope to make it slightly better, maybe just for yourself and your family.
Whoa. That sounds profoundly demotivating.
It's the absolute peak of the apathy injection. That's what the analysis calls it. It deliberately manages your expectations downwards. Crushes them, really. It actively dissuades you from even thinking about attempting any kind of fundamental systemic challenge.
Why? What's the function of injecting apathy?
It's the ultimate narrative pushed by those who benefit from the status quo, isn't it? If you can convince the most ambitious, most disciplined people that radical revolutionary change is impossible or naive.
Then they'll just focus on optimizing their own little corner within the existing system.
Precisely. They'll strive only for minor tweaks, incremental gains. They might become highly efficient, high-earning cogs in the machine, yes, but they will never become a threat to the machine itself. They've been pacified.
And it's just historically wrong, isn't it? The idea that you can only make things slightly better?
It's historically bankrupt, utterly contradicted by every single revolutionary figure, every major disruptive innovator who ever lived. These were people who explicitly set out to dismantle systems, to change the world fundamentally, not just nudge it a tiny bit.
Imagine telling, I don't know, the leaders of the civil rights movement or the suffragettes or even the scientists of the Enlightenment that their goals should only be incremental improvement.
It's ludicrous. It's ahistorical nonsense, but it serves a purpose.
That purpose being?
This pacifier ensures that the disciplined, isolated, financially integrated, self-blaming adherent remains completely focused on micro-improvements within their own little vertical slice of the hierarchy. They never look sideways, never look systemically, never question the fundamental flaws and inequalities inherent in the hierarchy itself. They've been successfully contained.
Okay, let's quickly pull those threads together before we move on. The key deceptions we've identified.
Right. We have the patriarchal bargain, rooted in fear, propped up by outdated social constructs. It cripples real connection, turns partners into convenient instruments.
Then the self-as-liability myth. Basically a logical fallacy, fueled by manufactured financial anxiety, creates a sick relationship with money, traps your capital where it benefits institutions.
Then the big one, the radical responsibility trap, pure ideological control, forces you to internalize systemic problems, apologize for being part of a rigged game, makes you police yourself.
And wrapping it all up, the incrementalist pacifier suppresses historical evidence, forces a false choice between doing nothing and doing almost nothing, ensures you never truly threaten the paradigm.
It's quite a package, isn't it?
It really is. So now we get to the part where we really dismantle it. We shatter the core claim that these are universal laws.
Exactly. This is where the cross-contextual analysis comes in. We need to show that these aren't timeless truths for all humans everywhere. They are very specific, culturally conditioned, often exploitative demands designed purely for compliance within one particular kind of hierarchy.
And it's crucial to remember, right, that the only way these axioms seem logical is if you first accept that foundational battlefield metaphor, the zero-sum game.
Absolutely. If you reject that premise, the whole house of cards starts to wobble. So let's introduce some. Let's call them heretical frameworks, worldviews that completely reject that starting point.
Let's do it. Where do we start?
Let's go back to target one. The woman choice, the patriarchal bargain. We've already talked about how it frames women as accessories.
Yeah, stabilizing accessories for the male conqueror.
So first, obviously, you can view this through the lens of feminist theory. It immediately flags this as objectification, right? The woman becomes a domestic manager, ensuring the man has the capacity to compete in the capitalist game. Her value is purely derived from his external success, not her own agency or being.
That's the straightforward critique.
Yeah.
What else?
Let's bring in some philosophy and psychology. Contrast this whole transactional approach with, say, Stoicism.
Okay. How does Stoicism challenge it?
Well, Stoicism teaches that genuine peace, genuine tranquility must depend only on your internal choices, your virtues, things you control.
Right. Inner citadel.
Exactly. But this success model makes a man's entire focus, his inner peace, contingent on choosing the correct external partner. It bases his tranquility on something outside himself, something he can't ultimately control. That's fundamentally anti-Stoic. It guarantees anxiety, not peace.
Interesting. What about other traditions?
Consider Buddhism. A core tenet is that attachment, particularly attachment to specific outcomes like demanding your partner, must create a perpetual safe space, perfectly tailored to your needs. That attachment is dukkha. It's a primary source of suffering.
Because you're clinging to something impermanent and outside your control.
Precisely. So this success model, by demanding intense attachment to controlling external factors like your partner's behavior, inherently ensures suffering according to Buddhist thought. It fails not just on grounds of equality, but on the grounds of basic psychological well-being and achieving genuine peace.
So the most important decision is actually a recipe for anxiety and suffering from those perspectives. Okay, what's next?
Let's take on target 2. Radical responsibility, that hyper-individualism, the idea that you alone are the sole cause of everything in your life.
Yeah, the idea that it's all on you.
This is presented as a universal truth, but it's really a cultural aberration. It's the absolute height of human hubris, isn't it? To think you control everything.
How do other frameworks see it?
Look at Taoism, the principle of Wu Wei. It's often translated as effortless action or maybe non-striving. It directly opposes the sheer arrogance baked into total self-blame and the frantic need for total control.
How so?
Taoism encourages finding harmony with natural forces, accepting what's beyond your personal sphere of influence, acting without unnecessary force or anxiety. You don't blame yourself for a hurricane, right? You adapt to it, you harmonize with it. Radical responsibility demands you somehow prevent the hurricane, or at least feel guilty for getting wet.
Okay, that's a very different way of seeing agency. What about community-focused views?
Right. Look completely outside the Western capitalist box to something like the Ubuntu philosophy, which is prevalent across parts of Southern Africa. The core concept is often summarized as, I am because we are.
I am because we are.
It flips individualism on its head. It focuses entirely on communal responsibility, interconnectedness. In that worldview, you literally cannot be a thriving individual if your community is suffering. Success is shared. Responsibility is shared. Failure is only privatized in the most broken systems. It's a direct, profound contradiction to the isolated, hyper-individualist gospel of success we're dissecting.
And the Marxist critique we touched on earlier.
Exactly. From a Marxist theoretical perspective, this axiom of radical responsibility is immediately exposed as a key piece of bourgeois ideology. Why? Because by forcing individuals to internalize systemic failures like low wages, lack of opportunity, exploitation as personal moral shortcomings,
It prevents them from seeing the bigger picture.
it successfully prevents the formation of class consciousness. If the worker blames their struggle entirely on their own lack of discipline or choosing the wrong partner or failing to invest correctly,
They'll never live up and realize the game itself is rigged. They won't see that the failure might be a function of the economic system or the structural advantages held by the owning class.
it's the ultimate ideological defense mechanism for the status quo. Keep people blaming themselves and they'll never blame the system.
Powerful stuff. Okay, final target. Target 3, the incrementalist pacifier. The apathy injection. The idea that you can't really change things.
Yeah, the don't even try message. We can shatter this with philosophies that are fundamentally about radical action and creating meaning.
Like what?
Take existentialism, especially thinkers like Sartre or Camus. Their whole philosophy demands that we create meaning through rebellion. Rebellion against the absurd, rebellion against the status quo.
So accepting incrementalism is.
It's choosing bad faith, in Sartre's terms. It's refusing to exercise the radical freedom that actually defines your existence.
Oh.
For existentialists, world-changing action, or at least the attempt, is often the only path to living an authentic life. Settling for slightly better is a cop-out.
And historically.
We mentioned historical materialism, the very engine of Marxist thought. Its entire foundation is based on the idea of revolutionary change. Societies aren't static, they're defined by conflict and massive transformations,
Feudalism gives way to capitalism.
which, they argue, inevitably sets the stage for socialism, then communism. The whole arc of history, from this perspective, is about fundamental system change. So the view that society must remain static or can only change incrementally is presented as a fundamental, verifiable, historical lie. It ignores how we actually got here.
Any other counterpoints mentioned in the analysis?
Yes, and I found this particularly compelling. The inclusion of indigenous worldviews. Many indigenous cultures operate on concepts like the seventh generation principle.
Thinking 7 generations ahead.
Exactly. Demanding radical foresight, sustainability, and actions today that ensure the well-being of descendants far into the future. That perspective, that timescale, is the absolute polar opposite of the short-term, self-centered, incremental goals defined by this modern success ideology.
Yeah, so across the board, feminist theory, Stoicism, Buddhism, Taoism, Ubuntu, Marxism, existentialism, historical analysis, indigenous wisdom, they all offer profound challenges to these supposedly unbreakable laws.
Completely. It proves they aren't universal laws at all. They are context-specific rules. Rules designed for compliance and efficient operation within a very particular kind of system. A hyper-competitive, profit-driven, hierarchical capitalist system.
Which brings us then to the synthesis, the final reveal, the ultimate deception.
What is the central binding lie? The core deception that holds this entire success ideology together?
According to the analysis, it's this. The belief that the current socioeconomic hierarchy, the pyramid we're all trying to climb, is somehow a natural and meritocratic order, and that personal liberation, freedom, can only be found by successfully ascending within that existing structure.
That's the hook. And that's why we call it the servitude blueprint, because the philosophy isn't a map to freedom. It's explicitly, functionally, a highly sophisticated recruitment manual.
Recruiting you for what?
Recruiting you to become a better servant of the system. It trains you, molds you into a more efficient, more hyper-competitive, more isolated, and crucially, more self-policing agent of that system. It promises you mastery.
But only within the cage.
Only within the gilded cage. A cage designed specifically to optimize your labor, your compliance, your contribution to its goals, not necessarily yours.
So every command we broke down, insulate yourself, pathologize yourself, grind relentlessly without joy, it's all designed for that.
Every single one. To make you an optimal, predictable asset for the existing financial and social architecture. Not a free agent, but a highly functional component.
The laws, then, aren't keys to unlock freedom.
The analysis argues they are the bars of the cage itself. They demand you surrender the things that actually make life rich. Mental peace, genuine connection, time, presence, all for the illusion of control and the distant promise of public validation. A validation that, even if achieved, the system tells you is never enough.
Don't trade your real life for a promise that keeps you forever hungry, forever chasing, forever in chains, essentially.
That's the core message. Your mind and your time are the ultimate territories of liberation. Don't surrender them to this blueprint.
Which leads us to the final call to action, the call to cognitive Armageddon.
Yes. What is the task then, if not climbing the ladder?
The task is not to get better at climbing the existing hierarchy. The task is to fundamentally question its foundation, to ask why this hierarchy exists in the first place, who it serves, and whether you even want to play that game.
So redefine success. Define it on your own terms. Terms that might actually include things this blueprint dismisses, like community, connection, art, rest, purpose beyond profit, maybe even revolution.
Burn this mental prison, this servitude blueprint to the ground, and start building something truly meaningful outside its walls.
And that's our deep dive for this week.
Remember, the most dangerous illusion is the one you don't know you're in.
But now you know. So here's our question for you. So we've torn apart the success gospel. Now the real question is, what is the one success rule you've held onto that you're finally ready to put on the chopping block?
Let us know in the comments. Question the narrative. Deconstruct the dogma. See the system.
We'll see you next time. Stay skeptical. Thank you for joining us.